So there are a lot of observations like this that neurologists like myself make, and we really don't go much further with it. At the same time that we've been looking at falls, the bioengineers have been looking at falls, and they have different eyes and different brains. They see things that we don't see, and they understand things at a different level that we do. And so for a long time, I kept on thinking, gee, if I could work with a bioengineer and we could talk the same language, maybe we would really shed light on this. And about a year and a half ago, the people at ASU were trying to recruit Dr. Thurmon Lockhart, who's going to speak to you. Dr. Lockhart is a bioengineer with a terrific insight into the biomechanics of falling, understanding why when your foot is moving at a certain rate, your body is not aligned and why you fall. I mean, really with a level of understanding that I could not have because I don't have, A, his brain, and B, the level of training that he had. He looks at things differently. And so he's written hundreds of papers on falls. He's designed devices to monitor falls. I mean, a lot of the things we do for falls are we will assess somebody who isn't falling and try and predict whether they're going to fall because they can't do this or they can't do that or they can't do that. And that's like trying to figure out if someone is a terrorist by asking them questions. And they, you know, have you ever thought of bombing the airport? Oh, no, I would never do that. Have you ever? But that's the level of understanding. Now, if we could actually assess people while they're walking and while they're in the process of having a fall, that would give us a tremendous amount more of information. And not just with our eyes, because our eyes can only see so much, but with instruments that could track how fast they're walking, how much pressure. And so last year, I got a call from people at ASU. They were trying to recruit this Dr. Lockhart. And I Googled him, and I said, oh, my God, this guy, he sounds terrific. But then he came and he, came to our place, and he looked around, and he said, do you have any patients with Parkinson's disease? I said, we've seen a couple in the past few years. We've seen a couple in the past few years. We might be able to get you 3 or 4. And then we began to talk to Dr. Lockhart, and I said, wow, this guy, he really knows his stuff, and he knows how to present it. And so we've been working together. We've designed some studies. We're looking at some drugs to see if they will help with falling. And I think we've really taught each other a lot. So it's my great pleasure to give you Dr. Lockhart. And I'm not being impolite to you walking out later in the lecture because I've got to be in another place.
Hello? Oh, okay. It's working really well. All right. Thanks for being here. This is really an honor for me to be here, especially with Dr. Lieberman. And the last about 8 months, we've been going through various scientific documents, and I am truly impressed by Dr. Lieberman and his team, and learned amazing amount of information, and I hope that we could help you further. Today I'm going to talk to you briefly about community-dwelling elderly fallers, and I've been concentrating on their fall accidents and their characteristics for close to about 20 years. And I want to kind of present that information to you for your knowledge, and possibly you might see something that maybe you could utilize and alleviate falls. So the title is, of course, Fall Risk Assessment and Community Dwelling Elderly. My name is Thurmon Lockhart, and Lockhart, I don't look Lockhart, but my dad was Lockhart, so I got this. He's a Scottish, by the way. Imagine that. But that story is later. So I'm going to talk to you, give you some introduction about fall accidents in general population, and then start to get into the research that we have conducted, and then get into the more aspects of the future research associated with the Dr. Lieberman and his group. The picture that you see here is actually a footprint of Australopithecus afarensis that survived about 3.2 million years ago. So this was actually created around that time. And what happened was a volcano erupted, and then there was a plume of ashes fell down, and then the rain came in, and so it became kind of muddy. And these beings actually walked on it, and then another plume of ashes fell on, and it sealed it. So this is a rock in Leotali, Tanzania. So if you look at these gait patterns here, this is almost like this is a modern human gait. So it appears that bipedalism existed at least 3.2 million years ago. And not only that, you got a little being, little kids, I guess, footprint right there. And the step length here is about this much. And so what we think this is happening was that this adult was walking across this slippery surface with an infant or some child and walking across with them, modulating according to the smaller being's footprint. So it kind of gives us an idea of human factors, but also it tells us that even 3.2 million years ago, we were able to walk in mud and these kind of things. So then the key question is, if you go through this kind of a timing, if we learn so much for 3 million years, why are we still falling? So that was the main question that we were trying to address. So now going back to the fall accidents are significant worldwide, not just here in the U.S., Australia, Belgium, Korea, Japan, everywhere we're having this kind of a problem. So this was data run at 2011, of course. Now there is amplitude higher. During that time, you got a significant amount of fatality, as well as morbidity, and it's costing us a significant amount of money as well. So this is projected to go up to about 50 billion and more increase in number of hospitalization as well as fatalities. So this is a significant problem, and we need to do something about it. And of course, U.S., our nation is doing a significant effort. They just funded $30 million study in looking at the evidence-based type of way to kind of alleviate these kind of problems. And so there is a lot of work that is being done at this time. But what happens, after that first fall for this type population is that right after that, you develop things like fear of falling, and in fact, hip fractures, and then some individuals actually die. And so then, what we're trying to do is actually try to avoid that first or second falls. And if we could do that, then we could really, really help out the statistics. So the quality of life really decreases right after the first fall. So our goal is to try to alleviate that by means of various modalities. So here are the fall risk factors, and these are the factors that you probably know about already. There are biological factors, behavioral factors, environmental factors. In fact, we have looked at a lot about environmental factors. Beginning of the falls research started in this area, environment, looking at the coefficient of friction. In fact, you could go back all the way to 1920s. There's a magazine used to be called the Soap and Cosmetics. I don't know if you guys have read that or not, but it existed during that time, and they were talking about coefficient of friction and how to modify that and to reduce fall accidents. So we've been thinking about it for close to 100 years in this modern era as well. Of course, biological risk factors, we're talking about sensory degradations that comes with a normal aging process. mainly vision, vestibular, and the proprioceptive system as well. Vestibular apparatus, of course, is your inner ear, and your vision is very, very important for maintaining your balance, and also your senses, proprioceptive systems, that has to be all intact and be ready to get engaged in case of a perturbation. Perturbation is basically what I talk about it usually as loss of balance, perturbed. And so then, we do know some about the sensory degradation, musculoskeletal weaknesses, and the key question then was, how does degrading mechanism can also influence fall accidents? There's also a gait adaptation that occurs with aging as well. We tend to walk slower to try to actually stabilize ourselves, take a shorter step length, maybe a little bit of a stoop posture. And if you look at a very frail elderly individuals, they start to scoot and increase in high heel contact velocity. And these are all the factors that may influence outcome of fall accidents. So where is it happening and why is it happening? Where? It's usually around home. Is it either inside of the home or even outside of the home, but it's not too far away from it. Majority of the accidents are occurring there. So this is something maybe you want to watch out for. Why? It's mainly associated with slips, trips, and postural imbalances. Those three categorization of accidents cover majority of accidents. So this is one of the reasons why we concentrate on slips and trips and various type of activities, turning, in fact, and that in itself is a very interesting topic. Whenever you turn, for example, how you turn may influence outcome of that fall accidents. So be mindful of that as well when you're turning. So what are we doing about it? Well, there are two general categories of a fall protection and a fall prevention. Fall protection we do very well, by the way. There's Code of Federal Regulations, CFR 29 actually dictates, how should the grab rail should be designed, floor should be designed. So there is some guidelines, and that can actually help us. That's a federal regulation. So, and a fall resting harness systems and these kind of things. Fall detection systems as well, but it's not completely regulated. So this area we are doing pretty well, but the problem with the fall protection is that you have to actually fall for this type of intervention to work, right? So that might not be a good intervention. So only way to prevent it is through the fall prevention. Fall prevention, we used to concentrate a lot on coefficient of friction, looking at the floor surfaces, hydrodynamic properties of it. And so this is, has been researched for, more than 50 years. And we know a lot about the characteristics of floor surfaces and the contact dynamics. And there's some also nice information related to coefficient of friction that are out there. And one area that we could really concentrate on is a fall risk assessment. And the reason for that is because, again, we want to alleviate that first fall, second fall, and also we want to assess the risk before you actually get into this kind of a scenario. And if we know before, then we could prevent it, right? There's various prevention solutions that are out there, balance, kind of exercise, gait type of training, strength training, and we are now about to go into the reactive training. I want to talk to you briefly about that. So there are various training regimens that are available, but only problem here is the assessment of fall risk. And so that's where I kind of concentrated most of my area to actually assess it. And then the ideal is if you assess it, then you could fix it. Without measurement, I don't think we could fix. Right? So when I started out, I just asked a very general question. Why do older individuals, fall more than younger adults? That was just main question. And then we start to get into the rationale, the factors that may influence fall accidents related to aging. And then, of course, we start to get into the sensory degradation, gait adaptation, and the strength degradation. So that kind of information was already out there, but we didn't know at that time how does that kind of degradation influence the outcome of fall accidents? And being a systems engineer, we like to take things apart and look at the interactions of it and the relationships, and possibly we could put this story together. And that is my essence of a testing for last about 10 years, about 10 years ago. So what is the relationship? And so in order to assess the relationship, we had to do these kind of a tests. We made them slip on a surface. We motorized the floor. We try to slip them there, and we trip them. So we did that for about 10, 15 years, and it was great. It was my dream come true, really. I mean, it's like I used to play like that, as well. But now I'm playing, for real here. Anyway, but so by doing that kind of a perturbation kind of a testing, we learned a lot about the initiating dynamics as well as reactive recovery kind of a scenario, and that may be very important for alleviating and intervening this kind of a fall. So since 1997, we've been doing this kind of a work. Started with looking at a coefficient of friction floor surfaces. We start to design things like electronic textile to actually assess our movement patterns. And the idea behind there is if we could assess instability of the body movements, maybe we could actually predict. And this is, of course, a wearable system. And we start to get into the mathematical arena where we could actually utilize some algorithms, because now you got a very nice technology. You need some kind of mathematics to go with that. And then, all the way down to deploying this kind of a system into the hemodialysis unit, and, of course, community dwelling elderly population as well. And now I'm looking forward to working with Dr. Lieberman in a Parkinson's patient population. And I really think that's where the answer lies. And then we'll talk about that. So when we're looking at the process of fall accidents, this is something that what happens, right? So when you break it apart, the accidents, you could break it apart in terms of initiation, detection, and a recovery. And the initiating mechanism, thank you again, Dr. Lieberman. And of course, just kind of a think about, I'm sure everybody had slips and falls here, or trip and fall. How many of you have not had that kind of accident in your lifetime? All right, there are a few there, which is amazing. Wow, I'd like to test you to find out what's going on there. You might have the answer. That's great. But most of us, experience that, and I experience it pretty frequently in a bathtub or something. I slip, but you make a recovery, right? So initiation happens when our friction demand is higher than what's available. So carpeted surface like this, when you walk over it, this is a coefficient of friction of about 1. So if I put a 10-pound on it, and then if I pull it at 10 pounds, it starts to move. So about 1. If you think about vinyl tile with the soapy water, it goes down to about 0.1. Our friction demand, usual friction demand for young individuals are 0.18 to about 0.20. As we get older, that friction demand increases a bit. And of course, friction is horizontal force divided by the vertical force. So that when the friction demand increases, you need more friction. But in case of slippery surfaces like the vinyl surface, where it's 0.1, physics tells you demand more, it's not available, slip will occur, right? So standpoint of tribology, we start to look at that, and we start to look at what parameters, what characteristics can influence this friction demand. And we find, and through our research, we're finding out that your step length has a lot to do with the friction demand, and your heel velocity naturally, right? But one thing that we did not, address at that time, now we know, is the abrupt transition of a center of mass. As we walk across, we are basically moving a center of mass it's like a center of mass ball that is translating across the floor. And also, when we're walking, we're almost never, in balance. And if you look at your foot patterns, and if we could project the center of mass down, the center of mass as you walk never goes inside of your foot. It always goes to the outside. What that means is every single point of the time, you're falling. And so the walking is basically falling and catching yourself, falling and catching yourself, right? So we study falling all the time. Every single step is falling and catching yourself. So then transitional acceleration is very, very important for friction demand. In this scenario, let's say, for example, somehow you demanded more. Now you didn't notice the surface, but you thought you were walking on a carpeted surface. And that also happens as well. Whenever there is a transitional floor surface from a carpeted surface to maybe a kitchen vinyl tile or ceramic tile, you get used to the carpeted surface. So there's more vigorous push. And then once you get down to the step onto the transitional floor surface, that's where we see a lot of a problem that occurs. So you might want to watch out for that as well. So initiation of a slip, has a lot to do with the initiation, of course. But that's still okay because we have a mechanism to detect it and also a mechanism to recover, right? Just like walking, we're catching ourselves, recovering it. So the detection mechanism, of course, is associated with the sensory. It's vision, your vestibular, and mainly your tactile sensation, what we call proprioceptive system or somatosensory system. If those systems are not, optimal, then you may not detect the perturbation, slip perturbation, trip perturbation, balance, imbalance situations. Or maybe it may take a little bit longer. And I will show you here that what we're talking about, difference of import from young and older individuals, about 40 milliseconds. And within that 40 milliseconds, if we could, that depends upon you either fall or not fall. Okay? Hopefully it'll pop up. There it is. Okay. So our detection mechanism, of course, we use this sensory information, and then if there is a degrading sensing mechanism, this could be a problem because you cannot detect it. That detection actually goes into your brain, CNS, central nervous system. There's a little bit of a programming there, but that programming is very, very quick. And this is the program we're talking about is reflexive program. So it is actually, hardwired almost to a certain extent. And that hardwire is what changes as we get older and as with different pathological situations. So there's something that we could actually look out for. And that's still okay if there's a little bit of a degradation, but you must have to have this muscle, right? The torquing ability. Because what's happening is, for example, in slips and falls, you slip a little bit and your center of mass is now going backwards. What you want to do is you want to bring that center of mass forward. Only way to do that is to step and use whatever you can to bring that center of mass forward, right? And that requires muscle tones, muscle power, not just the strength, but power. Power is associated with the strength and the velocity, speed. So you have to have those speed kind of characteristics as well. So then, you can see clearly what we're hypothesizing is, the differences between the young and old, possibly due to gait adaptation. That gait adaptation will influence slip initiation. Sensory degradation and musculoskeletal degradation will influence detection and reactive recovery, and possibly this is why people are falling. So this was our hypothesis about 20 years ago, and since then we've been testing significantly to assess the mechanism. And this is what we found. We did found that the step length, for example, mathematically, you can see clearly tangent of theta influences friction demand. And so here is this is a vertical force. We usually have this M profile. This is horizontal force. So here you see a peak is basically you have little backward force. and then you got a forward force, and then as you push off, there was a backward force. So that's what you're looking at here. Friction demand occurs about right here. So it's very rare that even if you're stepping on a very, very slippery surface, there's about 70 to about 120 milliseconds that your foot doesn't slip. And it's very hard to see that with your normal eye, of course. But with a speed camera, we could see that. So there is some time that we could actually do something about it, and we're thinking about various different options, maybe even sense that slip mechanically, and maybe throw out a puff of some kind of a powder or something like that, or even we're finding out the reflex, the startle effect is the reaction to the startle effect is so fast. We may be able to use some startle effects here. That means that as soon as you sense it, you startle them, and then they have this response. Maybe that could actually help us a little bit. So there's various things happening in this domain. And then, dynamically, we're looking at center of mass dynamics. As we walk, there is a, up and down kind of a motion. And it's really a beautiful motion. And it also goes to the side to side. And if you look at it from the back, it does that figure 8 kind of a thing. And it's very, very smooth, usually. But of course, with some different pathological conditions, it may influence that in a more abrupt manner. So what we're showing here is that velocity of your center of mass is also very, very important. And the velocity is, so as soon as there's a heel contact, there's a slower velocity of your center of mass. And then right after that, there's acceleration because of your push-off foot. So there is a deceleration and acceleration. And that particular aspects of deceleration and acceleration is very, very important in terms of friction demand and a fall recovery. So if you could imagine a system like this, and if you don't have enough center of mass speed that is going over, you're going to slip, right? And given a slip, if there is not enough of a center of mass velocity, then you may slip more and fall, right? So that center of mass characteristics are very, very important. And in fact, if you are doing some gait training, that's what you want to kind of train, that center of mass transitional part. And that kind of alleviates that front part. So if you want to, if you could avoid the initiation, then, you don't have to recover, right? So that's what it shows there. Now, what we did find out was that for the healthy elderly individuals, we're finding out because they're gait, adaptive gait, and in fact, that's what happens. As we may understand our own degradation, although we may not know it exactly, but something that tells us there's some kind of a degradation. And as a result of that, you're physically, without even thinking about it, you're changing your walking style. And that's what we call gait adaptation. That gait adaptation is a good thing, as we're finding out here. So for here, you got older and younger individuals, walking velocity, around at 120 centimeters per second. That's about normal velocity. And that goes to about 115 or something like that. Whereas you got younger individuals, very, very high. Remember, we talked about friction demand is related to walking velocity. So by walking slower, you demand less friction. And in fact, that gait adaptation is helping us. And this is a required coefficient of friction. Friction demand. For the healthy elderly individuals, they decrease it to all the way to like 0.15, whereas the younger individuals are in 0.18, 0.2 range. Right? So that gait adaptation is a good thing to a certain extent. Then why are these people falling and injuring themselves? So that was the question that we had. And what we find out was that the difference of import, the gait adaptation actually helps us to alleviate that initiation. But once it is initiated, you have to recover. And the difference of the import that we found was the recovery. So people are falling. Normal community-dwelling elderly, it's not just because of a slipping, initiating event, is they're falling because they cannot recover. And that's the bottom line story, and that's what we're kind of proving here, looking at the velocity profile mathematical model here. And we also saw there is various strategies that are out there. So here you can see slip And then there's an upper body strategy. There's also a lower body strategy. See that? So then your shoes becomes very, very important. So we have braking mechanism. We have upper body mechanism. It's beautiful. And you know, we have this if we could utilize it effectively. And here is the actual model of the person slipping and falling. And you can see in this model there, the person, the simulation is actually utilizing everything possible. Upper body, including the head. Everything to move that center of mass forward. The fastest way to move that center of mass is your head. Head weighs a lot. For some of you, it weighs more than the others. No, I'm just kidding. But move the head and then an arm response, right? Unfortunately, you cannot train that. You cannot train that reactive recovery anywhere, volitionally. So you can't do strength training. You can't do a walking exercise. You have to be slipped. You have to be perturbed. And once you are perturbed, you use this mechanism. And in fact, that's what we're going to be doing here pretty soon. So we're bringing a simulator here, slip simulator. And it's going to, you know, and I'll show you how we use it here. But, you know, what we found was the development of that is kind of interesting in that we first used that for UPS drivers. So we started back in 2008. They came to us and say, you know, our drivers are falling all over, and these are young kids. They're running around. You know, we got to do something about it. And at that point, you know, we've tested close to a little bit over 1,000 people, elderly and young individuals. One thing that we saw is that once you slip and fall like this, like that lady did, second time around, there's no way I can make you fall and slip. And that learning is innate. And you don't have to teach anything. It just goes in. And there's a proactive response, meaning, you know, before you walk on the floor, you know, you walk a little bit different, and the reactive response. Only way to train it is you got to get yourself in there and have fun with it. And if you, you know, so if you are interested in that, you know, Dr. Lieberman and his team will have that pretty soon. So this is what we're learning. And so then the reactive recovery scenario you see here is younger individuals. Yeah, middle-aged individuals are in trouble as well. You know, these are like 50-year-old, 55. You know, we start to degrade significantly at this age. And then, of course, here's older individuals. What's happening here is heel contact and then velocity. So what's happening for the older individuals, they're not controlling the velocity too well, the reactive recovery scenario. Same thing happens here. And once we, you know, analyzed this data, we knew that vision is very important. Motor control time, this is reaction time, is important. And the lower leg index, meaning strength, relative to your maximum strength. Here is kind of an interesting kind of a parameter here. You got young and old individuals. Younger individuals can slip at 144.45 centimeters per second and recover. Older individuals, they fall around at 100, right? So you could see the differences there, right? You don't have to have a big perturbation for elderly individuals to fall. Whereas the younger individuals, right, slip like this, they can make, you know, adjustment very easily, whereas older individuals with some degrading mechanism don't have to slip that fast or trip that fast, right? So there's the differences of import there. So the bottom line is something like this. Here are the muscle characteristics of the firing of the muscles, and here is the you know, slip characteristic, for example. And you got a young and an old. So you got a young person, you got an old person. You can see clearly young person actually start to slip faster, mainly because they're walking fast, and friction demand is higher, actually, remember? And then here's a mid-slip. So these guys go mid-slip very fast, but they're slipping fast. But the difference of import is right here. They were able to modulate that distance. And then, of course, there's less fall. So we knew that at that time, the recovery aspect was very, very important. And we knew that every single walking step is falling and recovering. Maybe we could utilize this kind of a paradigm to create a fall risk assessment tool. Because current fall risk assessment tool is somewhat accurate, but really not that accurate at all, right? We usually get a kind of a subjective rating, how many falls have you had, urinary incontinence, and various type of gait problems and balance problems. You rate it, right? And at the end of the day, you have a certain score, and then if you're greater than 10, you're fall-prone individuals. You're less than 10, you're not. And with this kind of a study as well, where we are actually looking at the elderly individuals and following people in a nursing home for about 2 years, and to see if that fall risk assessment score really predicts fall or not, and it did not. In fact, it was about 50%, meaning it's very inaccurate. So we do need some kind of a fall risk assessment that may be objective, and then utilizes all of this information to assess effectively. And if we could assess effectively meaning that this measure should give you some kind of diagnostic information. Once you measure it, it should tell you something about you got a gait problem, you got a balance problem, you got a postural imbalance problem. Something that is diagnostic. And of course, the rating scale doesn't do that. So we start to kind of think about it in a nonlinear area. So now we're about to develop a mathematical model using this understanding. So we thought the gait variability was a very, very good measure, because every time we fall, we catch ourselves, and if there is a deviations of this, then maybe that's indicative of fall-prone individuals. And people have done this already, right? Back in 1980s, they saw that step variability, individual with a step variability fell more. So there is some rationale there. So then now what we're doing is using that information. Unfortunately, that particular variability we're talking about linear variability, things like standard deviation and variance. And that measure is not really effective because how the data is actually processed. So it's really not useful. So we start to get into the nonlinear area, and that's what the nonlinear dynamics is all about. So here, the idea behind this is that there's a phase angle, leg angle, and leg velocity. If you plot your gait, it'll look like this, most of you guys. And if we are completely stable, you're beyond black line, right? Every time you walk, right? If you are completely stable. But nobody's like that, of course. So there'll be a little bit of deviation, but that's okay because we use our sensing mechanism to come back. So by looking at these kind of characteristics of your angle, characteristics of your leg, of your movement characteristics of your center of mass, we may be able to assess the instability. And so that's the kind of a dynamics we're using. So we're applying flow K multiplier, Lyapunov. So these are nonlinear measures associated with a chaos. So we are using a method of chaos here. And I don't know how many of you guys have studied chaos. Oh, okay, great. Wow. Usually you don't have one. All right. Okay. And so using those kind of numbers, we can actually look at the differences between the 0 and 1 fallers and non-fallers very nicely. And also indicate fall-prone older individuals, healthy old and healthy young. Looking at some of these characteristics, we're able to identify some of these individuals pretty well. Now, so we had this knowledge about 10 years ago, and then we proposed to NIH as well as NSF, say, hey, give us some money. We have some parameter of interest. This may be a fall risk measurement that we're maybe looking for. Let's go and do some testing and actually create a fall risk assessment tool. So that's what I did. And this is the study that I did with that nursing home, following them for 2 years. You can see the score of 10, probability of fall is 50, where, greater than 10 is fallers and non-fallers. So, it's not that accurate. So then, we want to create an accurate system, objective system, using some very, cheap, available tools. So we developed something like this. It's got an IMU. It's got basically accelerometers, gyroscopes, and a magnetometer. Using that information, we could actually assess some path characteristics of walking. And so we are actually developing some of these systems. to measure fall, detect the fall, which have been worked nicely, and the commercial development is already there. Fall risk prediction, this is not available right now, but this is what we're working on right now using NSF money. And we've been following about 300 people. We measured them before, so we've been measuring them for about 3 years. We're following them for 2 more years, and already 60-some odd people was not a faller, but now they fell. So we're going to follow them for another 2 more years, and then extract their data, and then create a fall risk assessment tool. So this will be available. Once this is available, then, and this is available to a certain extent now. We've actually created an app, which I'll show you, that includes all of these gait analysis as well, that you may be able to use if you would like. New systems are being developed. We utilize that system and we deploy to the hemodialysis unit, mainly because the hemodialysis unit, people really change their fall risk situation very quickly. Of course, these guys go 3 times a week and get all the blood worked out there, displacement of the blood, liters of blood for about 4 hours at a time. So we measure them before, and then they went into the hemodialysis, and then afterwards we measure them again because that was a known fall risk change. That happens very quickly, right? Normal individuals, unless you're sick or something, you're not going to change that quick. But with this kind of condition, it did. So we were basically looking at, can we even measure this? Can we measure these changes? And we were able to do that, and that's what this diagram looks at. And then we start to get into the community dwelling elderly arena. We're collecting, so this is a 300 set of data that we're talking about. They're wearing a sense and a force plate, and we kind of, work it together with a community kind of work, kind of getting involved. All the students get involved. We have a great time doing this. And then, of course, elderly individuals come and we measure them. We measure their eye, visual acuity. We tell them to bring all their medication, look at their shoes. We do various tests on them, and then we actually tell them, we say, you're at fall risk. And so she's not a fall risk. And the bottom line here is that these nonlinear measures could give us a very, very salient measure to assess fall risk. So here is data from Lipsit, right? So this is a heart rate. If you look at this is called an approximate entropy measure. Again, this is nonlinear chaos measure. So if you look at a 22-year-old female here versus 73, right? Even though the 22-year-old has lower heart rate, their variability, the AEP, the entropy, vibrates all over the place. Very healthy system. Healthy system is an open loop system and complex system. Complexity is defined by this, right? So whereas you got 73-year-old, right? Although heart rate is faster, but there is some kind of a less complexity. Less complexity related to postural perturbation is not a good thing because we want that complex dynamics, and given a perturbation, you react much faster given the complex system. So we are, in fact, using this very same calculation and apply to using the IMU system. So you got a non-faller. You can see very characteristics of that. You got a nice wave pattern. Along with that, you got a nice short wave patterns. Whereas the faller individuals, you can see there's a little bit of less complexity. So we are using this measure along with the gait velocity, postural stability. We incorporate that into the iPhone. Now we're testing some of these measures. So that's the scientific aspects of it. And then ultimately, we're going to come out with a system that can actually hopefully predict way before, we fall using various measures. So that day will be here pretty soon. And since then, we deployed this system to cardiac surgery unit. So right before they went into a cardiac surgery, we measure them using this iPhone app. And then we follow them for 3 months. And we were actually able to even predict who were not do well after surgery like this. And of course, we start to look at some obesity and these kind of characteristics as well. And then now we are here at Parkinson's disease. Parkinson's disease, in terms of fall accidents and the movement disorders, is a significant, we have a significant problem here because the L-DOPA and the medicine that was used to treat the gait, movement disorder, after a while, it no longer, works less, right? It doesn't work that well. And so then, since then, last year, NIN, that's National Institute of Neurological Disorder and Stroke, came up with a goal for the researchers. And they're basically telling us to concentrate on, develop effective treatment for DOPA-resistant features of PD. These features include motor symptoms, gait, balance problems, freezing of gait that leading to falls, right? So then there's DOPA-resistant features that right now we have no answer to. And so those individuals fall a lot. And by assessment, number one, and by effective training, reactive training, I believe, we could alleviate some of these. And so then, we're working with various individuals, modifying blood pressure, Northera. The first speaker has talked about that from Lundbeck. A cholinergic mechanism is going to come into play also to actually help out, in terms of reducing risk of falls. And then, of course, slip simulator kind of paradigm. So there are drugs that are coming. So for this one, this is really promising because, if we could solve this, and this is why I say, Parkinson's disease patients, hold a key to, solving this, fall problem all over, right? By looking at the pathological characteristics, I think we'll be able to alleviate that. So, for example, this one here, of course, this is orthostatic hypotension type of problem where, they're giving this norepinephrine type of medication that could actually, autonomically produce better pressure, right? So when you sit down and then when you're standing up, your leg pressure, your vein has to kind of constrict to keep the pressure in your head, right? I mean, the blood. So this medicine does that. And if this works in a Parkinson's patients, we're talking about 20% of fall reduction in a community-dwelling elderly, because about 20% of falls are due to syncope, hypotensions, and, of course, postural imbalances, right? Cholinergic effect. So this is a nicotine. It works, and there's an ample amount of literature that are out there. So by trying something like this in a Parkinson's patients, possibly we may have a drug that could actually alleviate fall. So one day, if you are fall-prone individuals, my dad was fall-prone individual. My dad was actually seriously World War II veteran, went to Korean War, and that's when he met my mom, and Vietnam, right? And when he was about 70s, he started to develop this condition, frequent fall. Here we go, try to get the male and falls, break ankles, break wrists, and face, and these kind of things. These individuals, maybe there's some answer there, possibly, through this mechanism. So this is a really, really promising area. And now, of course, I want to show you something here real quickly. Let's go to iPhone. Can we go to iPhone app? So this is a stability app. And basically, you wear this, you just put this on your body, stably, and then stand there for about 30 seconds, right? Right after you take shower, you could do this in the restroom. It will take you about 30. My mom has one of these, by the way. And she sends me the data all the time. Anyway, so this one tells you that, my area, of my stability and a velocity profile of my hand, of course. And but this is the pattern that we're looking at. So basically, what this pattern is and we used to do this with a force plate. So have you guys done some sway measure on top of the force plate? How many of you guys have done that? Yeah. So it's very, very similar to the force plate. And each one of these dots are COP parameters, right? So then you could actually, characterize, bigger the area, the less stable you are, right? And the movement pattern of that is also important as well. We could also measure walking velocity given this. It's got some sound. But again, you wear it in a hoister, which I could provide you with that. And then you wait for a beep, and then you walk basically. And then it gives you some time. Well, I wasn't doing it. So using these two measures, by the way, posture stability and gait velocity, we are able to predict the operation outcome, the post-surgical outcomes pretty effectively, and a fall risk as well. And then now, let's go back to the computer. Thank you. And so this is an iPhone. If you have an iPhone, this is great. And now we're about to develop another phone that you could actually wear. And you could kind of put them in a pendant. And it's a voice-activated, inspired by, of course, Star Trek. But it's going to be a phone, and basically it has an IMU in it. So you could just wear it, and then it assesses your movement characteristics, your stability characteristics, and it could inform various of your doctor, your sons and daughters, maybe worrying about you. These kind of technologies come into a play. So this system should hit U.S. market very, very soon. And then we're using some virtual reality, and of course the iPhone app to assess this kind of a thing. And then I want to show you one more thing is, let's go to this one. Do we have sound on this one? No sound?
Mechanics researchers at Virginia Tech have developed a slip simulator. It mimics accidents in a lab to help reduce slips, trips, and falls. The goal is to reduce fall without training. The simulator has a computer-controlled floor that moves suddenly, and a slippery floor designed to throw a person off balance.
Yeah, this is the system that we're getting.
Several parts of the body that all work together to keep us upright, including inner ear, vision, muscles, and nerves in the spinal cord. Throwing off one of these can cause loss of balance that can lead to a fall. Even carrying a little pillow, very lightweight, can influence our balance. Your walking style is going to change, and as a result of that, you may fall more. The simulator teaches the elderly and workers how to expect unstable conditions, which help them learn to catch themselves, improve their balance, and reduce slip and fall accidents. Experts say the best advice is to keep moving, which engages your senses and muscles. When you practice over and over and over again, then your balance actually gets better and you're much more stable. UPS uses the simulator to train its employees how to lose their balance yet still maintain control of their bodies. It's my livelihood. I'm not going to hop out here and hurt myself and can't be able to work. I'm definitely going to follow whatever safety procedures we're taught. Improving balance and safety with science. I'm Josh Lovewitz reporting.
Very good. So since then, we've deployed this to various organizations, including GE, BP, Los Alamos National Laboratory, Snap-on Tools. So the big companies are buying this now, and because they see the benefit of it. Now it's time to come into the clinical kind of realm where we could actually perturb and learn that special skill that you cannot do with normal kind of a routine. So there's a lot of things happening for you guys. So thank you guys very much. All right. Yeah, time for questions. Yeah, please ask any questions you got. Yes?
For those of us that are pre-elderly,
Uh-huh.
are we going to be allowed to participate in the study, or are you doing younger?
Yeah. Well, yeah, so she asked that, for those who are, like a older level or does not have too much balance, kind of a problem, can they use the slip simulator? Oh, you do have a lot. Okay, if you have balance issues, then yes. Yeah, you should. I think they will let you do that. And, of course, it's going to be directed through Dr. Lieberman's office, so please consult with them. And yeah. Yes?
What about for the
Yeah, right. Tai, it's worthwhile, right? Because you're going to strengthen your muscles, the reaction of that, stability muscles. But it's not like the training with the reactive recovery because, Tai Chi is a very controlled move. Recovery is not controlled. It's reflex. Reflex, there is no way to train this without having this kind of a system. Or falling, frequent fall. And then again, that's very dangerous, of course. Right? Very good. Yes?
I walk with a cane. I'm likely to take longer strides. And I do, put my cane ahead of me.
Okay.
And this is the side I tend to fall toward. So I have the cane on the other hand. Yeah. And then I put the cane farther ahead of me, and I'm taking longer strides. Now I'm wondering would it be better to have my feet a little farther apart? That would give me better balance, wouldn't it? Right. And then also to lift my heel and land on my heel. Mm-hmm. So I'm going in the right direction then to doing this.
Yeah. So what you have just done is adapted gait using more horizontal force, instead of doing this kind of force. So you've actually modified it yourself. So that's very, very good training. And in fact,
lift my foot up more too.
you could. Right. Yeah. When you do that, then your force is going to be more vertical, and that decreases the friction demand, as we talked about here.
My knees kind of
Flexible. Very good. Yes. I'm glad you say that because there's a brand new paper that is out indicating that possibly when you're using a walking aid, you could actually get into a worse situation. So you do have to get some good training on that. Make sure to have some good training, and you could actually try it out the simulator and see how in that scenario, what your reactions are possibly. And of course, you're going to be harnessed, so you're not going to fall flat. It's basically harness kind of catches you, and it's control type of fall. Every time that we have this kind of fall, funniest thing about fall accidents is, soon as we go into this mode, the first thing is, even though it is painful and everything, look around. So that's, fall accidents is that kind of, ego-driven accident. And it's very, very hard to control because you got to let go of that ego. Just completely let it go. Anyway. But, yes?
After you fall, isn't there a certain way that you should help yourself up?
Yeah, I'm not in that area. I try to catch people before actually fall. Yeah. I think there's a lot, some research that suggests that you need to fall and roll and these kind of things. Very good. All right. Any other questions? Yes?
A lot of what you've talked about is slipping and falling this way. I have a problem falling face down.
Yes, yeah. So simulator like this, we'll have some materials. Yeah, so you could actually trip and fall as well, which is very, very important. And turning. Turning, by the way, is very dangerous, and we just published the paper. So make sure, try to figure out what your turning strategies are. For example, when you're turning here, for example, right, you could turn this way, right? Your foot has to be in, for example. I mean, this is a dangerous one. Your foot in, and then you're crossing it here. Not good. What you want to do is you want to pivot and then go straight. Do not cross it. Does that make sense? And do the same side, on the other side as well. This kind of anecdotal kind of information could really help you, I hope. And even younger individuals have a hard time crossing it, right? And tripping themselves and things. Yes.
What is the best flooring for people, say, with Parkinson's or who have falling issues?
Right. I think the outdoor carpet is a very good one, something like this one. Of course, vinyl surface, if you get just a little bit of liquid, it's going to get very slippery. And also you want to veer away from something that has a high coefficient of friction that's going to catch your foot. And so then, very low profile that has some kind of a good coefficient of friction that's not going to accumulate, contaminants and things like that, just in case of accident. That might be a good thing. And just completely try to eliminate the transitional surfaces. Because what happens is we get used to it. A couple of steps walking on this, we're already used to it. And then, of course, when you walk on another surface, you're not used to that. So your demand will carry on. And that could be an accident as well. Very good questions. Yeah. Yeah. We just stay here all day. Ask questions.
These algorithms that you applied in your test apply to artificial hips? If you have an artificial hip?
Yes. Yeah, this algorithm, so what we do is to assess the fall risk, we measure your gait characteristics, so we kind of customize the measurement for you. So then, basically what we're looking at is customize the measure, and we're looking for variation thereafter, right? So, it doesn't matter if you have a hip. No. And you're going to walk a certain way, and we'll record that. And what we're looking for is a change of that. So, it's all customized. Okay?
Are we looking ahead for the day where tests for falling will be a requirement for physical testing, like blood pressure, cholesterol?
Oh, yeah.
Are we looking forward to have this test?
Yes. Yeah, Dr. Lieberman has a protocol that measures basically everything and anything, it appears. it's a significant amount of measures, and blood pressure, your medication, everything is going to be assessed, prior, because there's an inclusion and exclusionary criteria for these, and that could be read directly and see if you fit in there or not. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Any other questions? You have something? Yeah. Great. All right. Thank you, guys, and have a great lunch.